This is Necromunda, a planet on the brink. Only through constant vigilance is order maintained. The vigilance of Palanite enforcers like Captain Judex, who prepares to start another patrol beneath the domes of the Underhive. Another cycle in the hive that never sleeps. Used to be all that we had to do was break up gang scuffles, rescue high-born brats what stray too far from the spire, and make sure that the sump scum ain't messing with the water supply. Those were the days. Now we got the corpse grinders starting a full-blown uprising, and we're the only thing that stands between the Underhive and total chaos.
Hi, I'm Becca Scott, and this is how to play Necromunda Dark Uprising. This is a game of tactics, skill, and luck, and today we're going to show you the basics of conquering the Underhive. Each player has their own gang. There are loads of great gangs available, each with their own strengths, beliefs, and hairdos. Each gang is made up of a close-knit band of warriors, with champions, leaders, and hangers-on. They're doubtless up to no good, except for, and maybe including, the enforcers. Fighting over territory, archaeotech plunder, or to settle some long-running grudge, they vie for status and loot in the depths of Hive Arcos. Each fighter in your gang has their own card, showing their characteristics and weapons. Don't worry if all those numbers feel a bit much at the moment. We'll be taking a look at what they mean and how to use them soon. Each game of Necromunda you play will have a scenario. This sets the narrative for your game and tells you how many members of your gang are fighting and what they are trying to do. There are loads of really cool scenarios in Necromunda Dark Uprising, and today we're going to look at Scavenge. In this scenario, your gang must beat their rivals to a bunch of loot caskets to claim the spoils. Of course, whether you do that by getting to the crates first or by taking out enemy fighters is up to you. Let's take a look at the scenario now. This shows us how many members of your gang to use and how to actually win the game.
Enforcer K551 holsters his stub gun and tightens the strap on his helmet. Captain Judex slaps him firmly on the shoulder. This is it then, K. Last patrol before retirement. Secure the contraband and get back to the precinct fortress to celebrate.
You'll want about this much space to play and some terrain to move around, shoot over, and hide behind. A game of Necromunda is divided up into a number of rounds, and each round is made up of 3 phases: the priority phase, the action phase, and the end phase. The priority phase is where we decide who gets to go first in the action phase. Each player rolls a dice, and whoever rolls the highest gets the priority for that round. The player with priority will activate one of their fighters first. In the case of a tie, priority switches from the player who had it in the previous turn to their opponent. You only need to re-roll if it's the first turn. Once you've worked out who this is, each fighter gets a ready marker. The action phase is where we get to do some cool things with our fighters. Starting with the player who has priority for the round, each player takes it in turns to choose one of their fighters and perform up to 2 actions with them. In Necromunda, actions can be anything from opening doors to trying to shoot an enemy fighter. Some are only relevant for certain scenarios, so we're just going to look at the more common actions today. Every action fits into one of 3 different types: simple, basic, and double. Simple actions are things that are really easy to do and so can be performed twice by a fighter during their activation, or could be done before or after another basic or simple action. Basic actions are straightforward but not something you can easily repeat in the heat of battle, so they can only be performed once per activation. As with simple actions, you can do these before or after another action. So you could do one basic action followed by a different basic action, or a simple action and then a basic action. Double actions are things that require full focus and take up both of your fighter's actions for the round. Moving is a simple action. Each fighter has a movement characteristic that tells you how far they can move in inches. They might be the long arm of the law, but their legs are roughly the same length as everyone else's, so an enforcer has average movement. Some bulkier fighters might be slower, while others can move faster. All of the enforcers have code names. This is K551, but we're just going to call him K. He can move up to 5 inches in any direction, including up and down ladders. He can even climb over any obstacles that are up to 2 inches high, but this reduces his movement by the height of the obstacle.
Enforcer K551 took a quick glimpse around the corner and spoke into his comm unit.
Movement up ahead.
Captain Judux barked back. Wait for backup.
No time, Captain. They're almost at the stash.
Damn it, K551, hold your position.
Don't worry, sir. I'm just going for a look. What's the worst that could happen?
He clicked the Vox unit off and moved into position.
Shooting is a basic action. If you wanted to, you could move and then shoot, or shoot an enemy fighter and then move away. K has already moved, so now he can shoot. When shooting, you first need to pick one of your fighter's weapons and choose a target. Let's shoot at Korkagor here with K using our stub gun. After declaring the shoot action and choosing a target, we need to measure to see if our target is within range. Every weapon has a profile, which tells you its maximum range. As shown on its profile, our stub gun has a range of 12 inches. Each fighter has a ballistic skill characteristic. This shows how good they are at shooting their guns. Let's look at K. As a trained officer, he has a ballistic skill of 4+. This means that K needs a 4, 5, or 6 to hit with their weapon. Sometimes there can be modifiers to this roll. For example, if a target is in cover, they're harder to hit, while some weapons are more accurate at closer range. At the same time as we roll the hit, we also roll the firepower dice, but we'll come back to that later. So, let's roll the hit. Any shots that hit the target cause them to become pinned. This represents the fighter desperately diving for cover as the bullets start to fly. If they survive the hit, they'll have to use a basic action to stand up next time they're activated. Now we've hit, we need to see if the target has actually been wounded. As you might expect, a more powerful weapon is more likely to do some damage, so we compare the strength of the weapon, which can be found on its profile, with the toughness of the target. In this case, they're both 3, so we need a 4+ to wound our target. If the strength is higher, it becomes easier to wound, while if the toughness is higher, it's more difficult. What happens to poor Korkagor? Yes, we've wounded the target, but they get to make a saving throw. This represents the protective armor that a fighter wears in battle. Normally, Korkagor's plate armor would give them a 5+ save from this attack, but when combined with their fearsome Skinner's mask, they get a 4+ save. Will their armor save them? The bullet must have found a weak point, so they take a number of wounds equal to the damage characteristic of the weapon. Our stub gun has a damage characteristic of 1. So Korkagor is going to lose a wound. Unluckily for him, he only has 1 wound. When a fighter is reduced to 0 wounds, you roll the injury dice for them. The injury dice is a special dice with 3 different symbols. The out of action symbol means that the fighter is removed from play immediately. The serious injury symbol means that they are very badly hurt and can't be used again until they sufficiently recover, which can happen later in the battle. The model gets laid on its front at this point to show that this fighter is badly hurt. The flesh wound symbol means that they reduce their toughness characteristic by 1 until the end of the game. So while they're still active, they're badly hurt and will be easier to wound in the future. Let's roll for our wounded fighter. Ouch. So they're hurt, but still alive, for now.
K551 drew their stub gun.
Freeze!
Korkagor stopped and looked at the enforcer.
You can't stop us. The Underhive belongs to us now, lawman.
Drop the weapon, this is your only warning.
The Lord of Skin and Sinew watches over me. Your warnings mean nothing.
Korkagor started to laugh. The bullet hit him clean in the chest, and he fell into a heap, unmoving.
They're not so funny now, eh?
If a fighter is seriously injured within 3 inches of a friendly fighter, then the other fighter has to take a nerve test to represent the shock of seeing their buddy cut down. That means that we're gonna have to take a nerve test for Jurgoth here. To take a nerve test, we make a cool check by rolling 2 6-sided dice and comparing the result to the fighter's cool characteristic. In this case, they need to score 7+ to keep their cool. Do they pass? Oh no, they failed their nerve test. This means that Jurgoth is broken, and so he runs away 2d6 inches, desperate to get into cover.
Jurgoth froze.
Don't shoot, Enforcer! I have things you want! How about a lifetime supply? At the best, corpse starch. I can get that. I can get that.
K551 shook his head.
Looks like I have to add bribery to the charge sheet, scum.
Jurgoth's eyes darted left and right for a moment before fear overcame him. With a cry of panic, the corpse grinder fled into the darkness of the Underhive.
Remember that firepower dice we rolled earlier? Well, if you roll this symbol, there's a chance that your fighter's weapon has run out of ammunition. You need to make an ammo check for the weapon, testing against the weapon's ammo characteristic. If you roll equal to or higher than this number, then nothing happens. But if you roll under, then that weapon is out of ammo. Many weapons can be reloaded during the battle for the cost of a simple action, but for some, ammunition is so rare that they can't be used again in this game. Rapid-fire weapons are capable of spitting out a wall of lead, or superheated nails. To represent this, you roll a number of firepower dice equal to a weapon's rapid-fire score. While this does mean there's a bigger chance you'll need an ammo roll, there's an upside too. Each of these bullet hole symbols represents a hit on your target. If you need to get from over here to fight somebody, then you need a charge. A charge is a double action, which means it uses up both of a fighter's actions when they are activated. However, you get to make a move with them and add a further d3 inches to their movement characteristic, and if you end up in base-to-base contact with an enemy fighter, you get to fight them. So let's make a charge with Skorgorak and see if he can get some vengeance on the Enforcer who shot his friend. D3 means that we roll a 6-sided dice and halve the result, rounding up. That means we add 3 inches to their move. He can normally move 5 inches, so for this charge he can go up to 8 inches, which gets them into contact with their target. Poor old K. I'm sure he'll be fine. To fight in close combat, the attacker first chooses what weapons he wants to attack with. Fighters can typically use 2 close combat weapons. Skorgorak is armed with a brutal rotary flensing saw. Next, we'll see how many dice we're going to roll. We look at Skorgorak's attack characteristic, and we get to add 1 because he charged, meaning that we'll be rolling 3 dice. If you're engaged with more than one enemy fighter, you can split their attacks between them, but since we're only engaged with one, we can focus all our attacks on him. You roll that number of dice and compare it to the weapon skill characteristic of the fighter. Like ballistic skill, a fighter's weapon skill tests how they are in combat. Skorgorak is a deadly combatant when he's up close, as seen by the fact he hits on 3+, which is really good. So we roll 3 dice. As 2 of these rolls are equal to or higher than the fighter's weapon skill, we score 2 hits. As with shooting, we have to see if we've wounded the target. Skorgorak has a strength of 4, and the rotary flensing saw adds 1, giving us a total of 5. Poor old K only has a toughness of 3, so we need to roll 3 or more to wound them. We roll both dice and get 1 success. Thanks to their flak armor and armored undersuit, an Enforcer would usually have a save of 5+. But the rotary flensing saw has an AP value of -2. This means that you subtract 2 from any saving throw, meaning that you'd have to roll a 7. Since that's impossible on a 6-sided dice, no saving throw is taken, which is really bad news for K. The rotary flensing saw has a damage characteristic of 2, and K only has 1 wound. You get to roll an additional injury dice for each point of damage that the weapon still has to cause after the last wound has been removed. We get to roll 2 for the doomed enforcer. Oh dear, he never saw it coming. No one ever said the mean streets of Necromunda were a safe place.
K551 watched Jurgoth run off and sighed. He opened his comm channel.
This is K551. One hostile down, one fleeing.
Mind if I cut in?
Skorgorak bellowed in triumph. A voice answered back into the comm unit.
K551, repeat, please. K551, do you copy? K551! K!
Of course, it's lots of fun to fight opposing gang members, but don't forget that the scenario has a victory condition too. In our scenario, it's all about opening these loot caskets. To open one of these, you need to perform a special action called loot. Since they're not easy to open, this is a double action. So it's the only thing that your fighter can do in that round. Of course, not all of the crates in Necromunda contain treasure. When you open a box, roll a dice, and if it's a 1, the box is booby-trapped. If you roll a 4, 5, or 6, you've found something useful and your gang gets a loot point. Whoever has the most loot points at the end of the battle wins. That's just a small example of the types of actions you can take in Necromunda Dark Uprising. There are loads more, including aiming, taking cover, crawling, and operating access terminals, adding tactics and variety to your games. Once the player with priority has finished taking their actions with the fighter, their opponent does the same. They alternate taking it in turns until they have activated all of their fighters. When a fighter has been activated, they lose their ready marker. And when all of the fighters in both gangs have been activated, we enter the end phase. This is where we see if injured fighters recover from or succumb to their injuries, if broken fighters regain their nerve, and whether a whole gang decides to flee the battlefield. A bottle test is how we see whether the whole gang sticks around when the going gets tough. If any of your fighters are seriously injured or out of action, then there's a chance that everyone else will run away. And the more fighters that are hurt, the more likely it is to happen. To take the bottle test, roll a dice and add the number of your fighters that are seriously injured or out of action. For the Enforcer Patrol, we roll a dice, and we add 1 for K, who was taken out earlier, which gives us 4. If this is higher than the number of fighters who started the battle for the gang, then the survivors run away at the start of the next action phase. Fortunately for the Enforcer Patrol, they started with more than 4 fighters, so they're okay. For now. Next, we see what happens to any seriously injured fighters. We roll an injury die for Korkagor, who was hurt earlier, and then apply the results. So Korkagor suffers a flesh wound and reduces his toughness characteristic by 1 for the remainder of this battle. He's recovered enough to get back into the fray, but has been badly wounded. If a fighter's toughness is ever reduced to 0, they'll go out of action as they finally succumb to their wounds. But for now, Korkagor is no longer seriously injured, so he can get back into the fight.
Korkagor stood up, blood still pouring from his wound. He smiled at the sticky red mess. It was clearly a blessing from the Lord of Skin and Sinew. He walked over to the prone body of Enforcer K551.
I told ya, the Underhive belongs to us now. And there is nothing you can do to stop it.
He turned, only to be suddenly blinded by multiple flashlights. The last thing he ever heard was Captain Juddux giving the order to open fire.
Enforcers! Open fire!
Finally, we see if any of the fighters who lost their nerve managed to rally. So each of them needs to make a cool check. So let's go back to Jurgoth, who lost his nerve after seeing his friend get shot. He's passed. This means he's no longer broken and can be activated normally next turn. That takes us through a full round of Necromunda Dark Uprising. So, will you choose the Corpse Grinder cults and incite a revolution? Or will you go with the Palanite Enforcers to try and stop them? Necromunda Dark Uprising contains rules to link all of your games together in an uprising campaign that decides the fate of the Underhive. As your campaign progresses, fighters can get better as they discover strange, lethal weaponry and learn new skills. Don't get too attached, though, because if they get taken out of action in a game, like our friend Kay did earlier, they could suffer lasting injuries or worse. Necromunda Dark Uprising is only the beginning of your adventures in the Underhive. You can explore other insidious rebellions with the Book of Ruin, take charge of other gangs, hire lethal bounty hunters, and even set mighty ambots onto your enemies. Now you're ready to play Necromunda Dark Uprising. So get your gang together, and I'll see you on the streets of the Underhive.